Rishad Premji, Chairman Wipro Limited, Vikram Chandra, Founder Editorji Technologies, ladies and gentlemen. It is a real pleasure to have you with us for a very special session with a dynamic young man who has taken on a pretty challenging role in challenging circumstances. We are truly delighted to welcome Rishad Premji for the very first time on the AIMA platform. I'm also delighted to welcome Vikram Chandra, a friend of AIMA, who will, in a fireside chat, discuss with Rishad how India's IT sector is overcoming the fracturing of world trade. Ladies and gentlemen, though the tech sector has benefited immensely from lockdowns, and that's a personal view, and work from home trend, it has also accentuated the challenge for conventional IT services industry. Free movement of skilled personnel is central to this industry, which was interrupted by border closures earlier in the COVID pandemic, and now it has been choked by restrictions on visas in key markets. During COVID, there has been an acceleration of the shift towards plug-and-play infrastructure and applications, and that requires the IT industry to adapt quickly to avoid obsolescence. We're privileged to have Rishad, and he can tell us how the IT services supply chain is adapting to the changing scenario. So over to you, Vikram.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Kulekar, and it's absolutely fantastic being here. Rishad, it's great that you could join us. You know, I have to tell you that if you had told any of us 7 months ago that we'd be having this AIMA National Convention, entirely virtually, nobody present in the same room, all of us talking from the comfort of our own houses, and that everyone would find it completely normal. You wouldn't have believed me. Maybe you would have thought, yeah, it's possible, but that everyone thinks it's completely normal, that's the sort of ways that mindsets can change in just 6-7 months. If I told you that every business meeting in India would start to the second, and everyone would consider that also to be normal because you're going from one Zoom to the other every time the hour ticks over. And it's completely normal. And you're not supposed to be more than 30 seconds late. Even that would have, made you think a little bit if I told you that 7 months ago. So it's clear that things have changed, and things have changed dramatically in many industries, many sectors. Obviously, things have turned for the worse. But IT, digital, these are some of the places where the opportunities that are thrown up by this tectonic change are obviously very great. So the opportunities are as big as the challenges. And joining us to talk about both the opportunities and the challenges, obviously, is Rishad. So thanks so much, Rishad, for doing this again. Your overall sense, though, on how this is panning out for IT, both opportunities and challenges?
Yeah, so Vikram, first of all, thank you for having me, and thank you to Sanjay for that warm introduction. As you rightly said, 7 months ago, if we don't imagine the scenario, nobody could have imagined the scenario. 7 months ago, if you would ask me that 185,000 Wiproites could work from home, I would have laughed, right? The fact that you could have planning, business continuity planning for 100% of people just seemed unfathomable. But it's happening, and it's happening on scale, and it's happening across the industry. So it's terrific, and I think a terrific sort of feather in the hat for the Indian IT industry, and I think it only bodes our story of being a real global powerhouse in terms of skills, being a real global powerhouse in terms of resiliency as an industry. I think it's pretty remarkable. Look, I think Vikram, the opportunity from this is tremendous for the technology industry. I think it really opens up a whole new conversation on how and where talent sits. Right? Does talent really have to be in front of customers? Do the issues of borders shutting down, vaccine nationalism, which closes borders perhaps further, does it completely change how and where we can provide talent from? And I think it really does. Right? Today, you can be sitting in Bangalore, or you can be sitting in Cincinnati, and you can be doing the same quality of work and the same kind of work in this virtual model. I think it also opens up where and how you access talent. Right? It fundamentally changes the ability to access talent from people who are sitting in smaller towns and cities, who never want to be in the big cities of Hyderabad and Bangalore and Chennai. So you can access that talent base. You can access the talent base of women who want to come back to work post-maternity and don't want to be in an office or need the flexibility of being able to work from home. You can access talent, for people with disabilities who can't come into office spaces, right? You can access crowdsourcing models where talent is really sitting everywhere in every nook and corner in the world, and people can be sitting somewhere in the middle of nowhere in their pajamas, and still you can access them. So I think it really changes and makes talent much, much more inclusive than it's ever been. I think the government has been tremendously supportive in making this happen. It required a fair amount of support in terms of relaxing regulations to be able to work from home in the short term, and the government really moved very quickly. And I think what's amazing is the government is also thinking long term about how this can be a permanent feature and how we can do this, going forward beyond, say, December 31st, because all of us as organizations are thinking about it very, very seriously. So one, I'm very excited in terms of, how talent works and how you can access that talent and the kind of talent you can access. Having said that, the reality is we all as an industry work with many, many of the large enterprises across the world in many, many different industries. And those customers are struggling, right? They are going through challenges in terms of their own demand and their own business models. And so I think it creates we're not living in a vacuum. And the reality is that the industry has struggled a little bit or a fair amount in Q1 of financial year. And while things seem to be stabilizing and getting better as you move into Q2, which is this quarter, and as you move forward, the reality is we're not immune from the challenges that our customers have faced. The reality is that our customers have significantly cut off on spend. They have taken a much, much more thoughtful approach on where they spend from a discretionary standpoint. But the good news that offsets that, so while this spend is coming down, the good news is everybody is needing to engage with their customers in this new medium. And so you're having to spend on a digital medium of engagement with your customers, which you didn't think about before. And we can talk about that a little bit more. And that provides a huge amount of excitement to the model and to the industry.
So Rishad, the many points that you threw up, which I'd like to go into in some detail with. So what you spoke about speaking to customers. Now, when I was to 2 years ago, tell people I've quit television news because I think the future is going to be in digital forms of disseminating video news, and you need to find a completely different way to do it because the present models are broken. It used to be, first you had to get people okay with the basic idea that, will TV news and print go away and will something else come? And now that conversation is easier. So when you and the IT industry are talking to customers and saying, you can outsource a lot, you can have multinational jurisdictions, you can get somebody like Wipro or one of the other tech companies to come in and totally change the way that you're doing things. I guess with disruption of the sort that we are seeing, that first basic conversation is much easier. We can change our supply chains completely.
Yeah. No, look, Vikram, I don't know if this has fundamentally changed. Perhaps it's changed the mindset of some customers who are very conservative about looking at global models a little bit more. And it's led to that a little bit out of necessity as opposed to, being completely comfortable with it. So I don't know that this has fundamentally changed. There's a whole sect of people who are just completely close to the idea of global sourcing, and now they have no choice or are very seriously considering it. There certainly is some portion of that, though I don't think that's a major wave because most large global customers were already open and thinking to this model, right? I think what has changed is how comfortable customers are in engaging in this model, in making decisions, in transitioning projects virtually, in onboarding people virtually. And the comfort from that comes from the fact that all of us are engaging in this model. There's nobody that is not working in this shape and form, right? So, for example, I remember distinctly having this conversation with a customer who was based in the UK in March. And if you recall, late March, where India had gone into lockdown, the UK was perhaps ahead of us, peaking, and the customer was incredibly worried. And he said, look, technology can wait. We have a much bigger crisis. And I've told my team we can wait, A. And B, I'm not comfortable communicating with 50, 60, 70 key leaders in my team that we're going to go through a major, partnership opportunity or outsourcing opportunity with you, Wipro, in a virtual format. And he said, look, so we're going to push this out for at least a quarter or 2 quarters. And then he comes back early May, so 5 weeks later. So forget 7 months, 5 weeks later, comes back and says, hey, look, I'm completely comfortable now communicating with my team in this virtual format because the entire world is working in this virtual format for the last 5-6 weeks. And so I'm very happy to transition, and let's transition remotely. And so that project started much faster than he had anticipated 5 weeks earlier than that. So that's, I think, quite amazing. The fact that customers are comfortable transitioning new projects to a new partner. This is not an existing customer. That they're comfortable onboarding people, that we are comfortable onboarding people is pretty remarkable. And I think we cannot underestimate the fact that everyone is going through this. We as independently as a company had suggested this, that we want to work in this virtual format going forward. And we were the only ones, or one of the progressive ones thinking about this, it would not have worked. But because everybody is going through it, I think it makes a big, big difference because we have no choice. No customer wants to meet you in person, even if you can travel overseas today.
So do you think work from home and the sort of changes that are work from home, perhaps one of the most obvious manifestations of the way, the pandemic and the lockdowns have affected the business world. Do you think this survives for good? And do you think like 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, vaccines come, coronavirus is over, but people just say this was a better and a more efficient way of doing things? Why waste a day or 2 days traveling to meet a client when we've got used to talking to the person and doing it in 30 minutes? Is this a permanent shift?
Yeah. So Vikram, I would not discount the power of being able to communicate person to person. I can't smell you, I can't sense your body language, I can't feel whether you're fidgeting or how you actually feel, right? This is very good. This is perhaps 85-90% as good, but it's not the same as being in person. We can't catch up after our meeting and perhaps have a meal together or grab a coffee together or get a drink together, where the informality of relationships build. And informality of relationships, I think, are very important for building trust in relationships, right? So I wouldn't fully discount that one component. I wouldn't also fully discount the fact that people are very comfortable going back into a mechanism that they're familiar with, that have been familiar with for generations. And so I'm not sure if 7 months fundamentally changes that. I wouldn't discount the fact that people like to connect, and the human need to connect and connect in person is very high. So I wouldn't discount all of those things. But having said that, I don't think the model will ever go back in its full shape and form, at least for us as an industry, to the way it was, and at least for us as a company, I would say, in the way it was, right? And I think we are keen to get people to come back into the office. I don't think everybody will come back, but the model we are thinking through, and it's still early days, is we want all of our people to come back some of the time, right? And so some people can work, everybody works from home some of the time, but everybody comes back for at least 3-4 days a week. And I think it's incredibly important that people come back for 2 reasons. One is, I'm a big believer that culture grows and spreads and gets understood and lives and breathes in an environment where people get to connect face to face, right? I think the conversation that happens over lunch, or the water cooler conversation, the water cooler gossip that happens about what's happening and not happening in the company, I think it's an important ingredient for how organizations survive and breathe and grow. I think that's incredibly important. And the other reason I think it's incredibly important is for innovation, right? I think ideation, innovation, magic oftentimes happens in the downtime. It oftentimes happens when you're frustrated sitting in an all-day meeting and nothing is coming out of it, and you just happen to be sitting in the same room, and then suddenly something comes about, right? So I think it's important for those kinds of things. And these models are very, very good, but they're restricted. They're very formal. They're transactional. We get together for 45 minutes, or we get together for an hour, and when the meeting is over, we're gone. We're not sitting in our homes with our videos on, and you're doing your thing and I'm doing my thing, and suddenly I have an idea and suddenly I reach out to you. It doesn't work like that. And so it is efficient, but perhaps it's not 100% efficient. And so we would certainly like people to be coming back for some of the time, but we will not go back to the old model 100%.
Yeah, you made a very important point on trust and credibility, which I do want to come back to in just a couple of minutes. But I just wanted to ask you, when it comes to plugging in, if you're looking at the IT supply chain and others, there's been so much talk, Atmanirbhar India, and how do you plug into global supply chains? To one extent, of course, for IT and for other such areas, it becomes slightly easier for, if you have a client, for example, who's sitting in the US or Europe, they're already used to dealing with workers who are remote, who are sitting in their homes. And if you've accepted that principle that these people are working from their homes, it almost doesn't matter to you whether that person is in their homes somewhere else in America or actually is working through the night in India. So to that one barrier, which I guess may well get disrupted. And you think that's something which people are going to find? You were talking about going even within India, going into rural parts, going into tier 2, tier 3, finding workers or talented people who are not just in Bangalore or Mumbai or Delhi. So the spread of the workforce around the world and within a country, is that something big that's going to happen?
No, I think that will happen. But again, don't underestimate, Vikram. My submission is that you still want to connect. Customers will still want a few people near them, right? Some people will still want people perhaps in the same time zone, people coming into the office. But I think the openness and comfort in a very different level with this virtual model, I think has changed. And so that is very, very powerful. But I think people will still connect. Like I will still want to connect with people, eventually. I don't think this model sustains where I don't go into the office ever or go in once or twice a month, which is what I'm going in at the moment, forever. I don't think we can afford that. We add, for example, we have about 10, 12% attrition. We add people, about 10, 15,000 people a year. So you have churn of about 30, 35,000 people every year. People leaving and new people coming in, right? If those people never come into an office, never experience what we as Wipro or Company X is like, how do they get and feel a sense of belonging, a sense of connectedness, right? If you're only going to connect with people virtually, that doesn't happen. So I think the social, informal connectedness is incredibly important. And I think that will require and necessitate people coming back. At least that's our view. That's my personal view. And I feel very passionately about it.
Can I just turn back to that question of trust, right? Because when you are dealing with people whom, as you said, you don't have that comfort with, you haven't met a new vendor, for example, or a new company when you're talking to. It applies at the company level and it'll come to the individual level also with team members and with other people. But first at the company level, you don't know who the person is. You're talking to some company in India and you're saying, will you come and work for us? That question of trust becomes really important. I'm betting on this person. I haven't had dinner with the person. I haven't met that person and gone and visited the offices. I'm talking to the person on a Zoom call and I'm taking a decision to bet a lot of my future on this person and on this person's company. Is that where trust and credibility are going to become perhaps two of the most important features going forward? And maybe that's where a company like Wipro and others may have an advantage over a smaller company or a startup. People know you, they say, hey, have you heard of this company?
Yeah. Look, let me share, I'll come to that question, but I want to share a story, Vikram. One of the things I've been spending a lot of my time on over the last 7 months, since the end of January, early February, and this began pre-COVID, it began in person, was I'm driving this whole effort around culture and something we call the 5 habits at Wipro. And I've personally now met about 9,000 of Wipro's leaders. I've done 55 sessions personally, about 2.5 to 3 hours in each of these sessions, so about 155 to 160 hours, really in talking about, the ways you behave, the ways you conduct yourself, and the ways you work together, the ways you collaborate, because I think it's incredibly important in helping an organization succeed and grow. And one of the things we talk a lot about there is about trust and about building trust. And I'm a big believer that to build trust, you have to start from a place of trust. You have to start from a premise of trust. So if I believe Vikram is working at a customer A or is a Wipro employee, and he is a sincere person coming in to do a decent day's worth of work, and he has the trust of his boss and the trust of his organization, then you have to afford the same trust to me. You have to start from a place where you trust me, unless I give you a reason to mistrust you. And so we're applying that philosophy for people working from home. We're not using productivity tools to assess, whether Vikram is actually working an 8-hour day or a 9-hour day. We're trusting that Vikram is working an 8-hour day or a 9-hour day and is committing the commitments he meets, meeting the commitments he meets. We're certainly dealing with people who abuse that very stringently. And there will be people that abuse that. But you cannot be punishing or monitoring the 95, 97, 98% of people who follow the rules, right? So that's one, just the premise of trust and how you work and how you engage together. And we can talk a little bit more of that. The other point you make is an important one. And the fact that, customers don't know you, they don't know me, they don't know Wipro, but the fact that you have a track record, the fact that you have a company, that you have a reputation that you've built over time in the marketplace, and that stands for a lot, really helps as an organization. And so you start off from a premise of trust because you've built trust over the last many, many years as an organization as well. So those things help. But I think you've got to really start from a place where you afford trust to people as opposed to mistrust to people, because otherwise it leads to a very different kind of conversation, which can be corrosive, in my view, for an organization.
Do you think the Indian IT industry is to that extent well positioned because by and large, over a period of time, they have acquired high credibility in their relations with the rest of the world. I wouldn't say that necessarily about every Indian industry. There are Indian industries where partners have come and they've dealt with them and they've had their fingers burnt and they've said, oh my God, what happened? But by and large, the IT industry has been able to deliver, has been able to have that high credibility. There is that sense of respect, which now dates back almost 2 decades. So is that something which you think separates, and which are the other industries which you think that same thing could be said for? And for the IT industry, is that credibility going to really stand you instead now?
Yeah. Look, I don't know. I mean, I'm not an expert on others, but I would tell you, I think it really helps. I think the fact that, we as an industry over the last 20, 25 years have built some great organizations on bedrock of strong governance, high integrity, really delivered world-class products and services, I think has really helped in terms of building a very strong standing for the industry. Coupled with the fact that we have great talent, I think what we've lived through in COVID has only further strengthened and substantiated that, right? The fact that we've all been able to move from being in office spaces to working from home. We've met our customer expectations. We've moved to effectively 100% business continuity planning. We have less than 2% of our people coming into the office. I'm assuming a lot of the others are in a similar range of how many people are coming into the office. So the fact that we've been able to keep our customers working so that they can serve their customers in a model which was quite chaotic back in March, when you were moving people home, you were physically moving desktops in some cases home, because believe it or not, some people still in the past used to work on desktops, especially in some parts of our business where people are in shifts and sharing infrastructure and assets. I think that's only further strengthened the fact that the model is resilient, the model is credible, and the model can scale further. And I cannot underscore the importance and support of the government, because the government has been incredibly supportive to enable many of this to happen, to realize that this was a critical point in the evolution of the IT industry, right? We could have gained a reputation of really being someone who can survive and star in this transition, which we were able to, or we could have been an industry that fell apart because there was so much chaos and we were not able to transition to a work from home model. So it bodes well for the Indian IT industry.
Right, now, looking at some of the possible challenges to that, and that's one of the poll questions that we're also going to throw out. The fact is that as software gets better, as AI gets better, as people figure out that plug-and-play solutions are available, if software becomes really good, you can get something and plug and play it, and it just works in a very efficient manner. So you may not need to get IT help or IT support. That would be one of the scary scenarios that people will look at, that 10 years or 5 years or 3 years from now, AI is so good it can do a lot of the things that you would require people or IT companies for. Is that a concern in your mind?
No, I think that's, these are changes that are going to happen in the model. The reality is today with cloud and software as a service that is being hosted on infrastructure cloud, right? The reality is the scale and size of the deals and the models that you were working on is different. 5 years ago or 6 years ago, a deal that could have been, I'm making this up, $500 million today, maybe $250 or $300 million. It doesn't mean to suggest that deals have gone away, but the deals and the shape and the nature of those deals has also changed, right? The reality also is that there'll be enough countries and enough companies and enough industries, to our earlier point, who are still very nascent in terms of their own journey on global sourcing. They haven't quite evolved as much as many other companies have, and there'll still be an opportunity to engage with those companies. The reality also is that many, many large enterprises, Vikram, today have a whole spaghetti of infrastructure and IT inside of their organization. They have some critical legacy systems. They have multiple different systems that don't talk to each other. So even though if they're moving to new age capabilities, they still need to get all of these different pieces to work together, because they do have legacy. It would be very different for a company that was beginning today and starting completely with new age infrastructure. So certainly what you can do and how much you can do and the scale and size of projects perhaps is changing. But the reality is that you are going to play an active role in partnering with these new age companies to help deliver them to customers. And there's a huge opportunity in this whole digital first, digital transformation journey that we're driving. Equally on new age capabilities like AI, how can you leverage those capabilities to significantly do work that was done in a very automated manner with human beings, you can now use machines to be able to do that, right? That's just the reality. So we have to adopt and partner with this. So skilling will become incredibly important. How do you reskill and upskill people? And we can talk a little bit more about that, because that is the future of how you keep the model relevant.
Yeah, I think that skilling is a really important one. We just wanted to quickly just touch on the aspect of China and a lot of the reskilling story that you keep hearing, or the moving into global supply chain story that you keep hearing about in India is about people are going to move away from China, and India should capitalize on that. Obviously, India always had the lead when it comes to services, and especially IT services. But is there a sense in your mind that the possible emergence of China as a competitor to India and this has been diminished as a result of all that's been happening in the last 4 or 5 months?
Particularly on the services side, on the
IT side, like the same questions that you don't allow Chinese companies into 5G. Are you okay allowing Chinese companies if you're in America, allowing Chinese companies to come in and be running your IT services? So is there a sense in your mind that one competitor could perhaps be a little bit on the back foot now?
Yeah, this was something that's been talked about for many years, Vikram, right? How could China be a threat? Scaled technical talent, could they scale and build services models? And the reality is that there were many companies that emerged maybe 10, 15, maybe longer years ago. Many of them listed on the NASDAQ overseas, and many of them were able to get to a certain size, but maybe $250 million. They weren't able to scale beyond that. And I'm not sure what the reason specifically was for that, but they were not able to scale, right? So we don't see any scaled companies from China so far. And to your point, the current context and situation perhaps just de-risks that situation even further. But I will tell you, we have not been worried that much as an industry, frankly, and even as a company, that could this model be disrupted away by Chinese companies?
Okay, I'm going to just start taking some questions that are also coming in as we go along. So Ritunjay Sagar is asking what you were talking about skilling. He says, how will you manage to keep your technology skills up to date in this pandemic? I guess both as an individual, it's something you should be doing, and as a company.
Yeah. No, I think huge focus on this, Vikram, because the reality is, new age technologies and new age skills, particularly in this whole conversation with customers who are looking to move to this digital first medium, right? To engage in this new model. For example, just with simple things like collaboration tools, or your model is being completely disrupted because your industry now doesn't have the kind of context it had before. My favorite example is a restaurant, right? The restaurant storefront has moved from being the physical space which you walk into to being an app, because people are ordering online and people are delivering from home. And likely those models will continue even after people can go back into restaurants, because some restaurants have discovered the magic and the value of it. And I'm not talking about takeout places. I'm talking about high-end places as well. Just the whole model has changed dramatically. So reskilling people both inside of your organization as well as us as an industry that provides skills to people is incredibly important, right? I know we are working very closely with a program that NASSCOM and a lot of us as industry companies have participated, called the Future Skills Program. In its first phase, the objective is how do you reskill 2 million of the roughly little over 4 million people that are employed by the industry, right? And so how do you ensure that they have relevant skills moving up the value chain? And so we're spending a lot of time, Vikram, on that. The other thing we're doing is we've come up with a platform called Top Gear inside of Wipro, where people across the company can log on, can participate in new age technologies, can get assessed, certified, and then can also be crowdsourced within Wipro to actually work on projects that require those skills. Because the biggest challenge for an individual that's been reskilled is not only, hey, look, I've been reskilled and now I'm certified, but the first question somebody would ask you legitimately was, hey, look, so where have you actually applied these technologies? Where have you actually had some hands-on experience? And that's the challenge which people run into, right? Because it's great, I'm certified and whatever, I've been through the program, but I don't have real life experience. So if you can be crowdsourcing within Wipro for these new age projects with new age skills that are coming up, then that person can go back and say, hey, look, when the next project comes, that I worked on this project. And so it's a win-win, because Wipro gets to access new age people that have been qualified and crowdsource them into projects, and those people get to say, hey, look, I've actually had real hands-on life experience. So we're spending a lot of time and effort on that.
I've heard some companies saying, yeah, but the problem with that is that once we've reskilled people and trained them, it's easier for them to leave and say we're going off and working somewhere else.
Yeah, but that's a reality, Vikram. That's like anything else. You cannot. It's a catch-22, right? They're not. If you're not upskilling people, then they're not relevant for current projects. And then it's your job to create enough enticement and excitement. I find people leave oftentimes less just for compensation. I find oftentimes people leave because they're not getting to work on exciting stuff. The most criminal thing you can do is have retrained someone and still get them to work on something legacy. And so they're feeling irrelevant because, hey, I'm newly skilled and I'm not getting to work on any project that's relevant in the new skills that I've now developed and which are relevant and people want. So I'm very worried that they're going to get outdated. So then I will move because I can actually work on projects that leverage these skills.
All right. I'm looking at another couple of questions. So does an organization need to realign and reorganize once again, once we are through the pandemic? So I assume the question refers to one set of reorganizations happen right now. Post-pandemic, back to normal, continue what you're doing now or try and find a hybrid?
No, I think, as I said earlier, I think it will be some sort of a hybrid model, right? I think there's a lot of learnings that have come out of some of this experience over the last 6-7 months, which I think is incredibly powerful, which I will personally and we will try as an organization to incorporate. So I think some things will change. If you ask me, because some of my big learnings have been, one, the importance of being proactive and reacting to situations sometimes when you don't have a full piece of information. So I remember, for example, back in early March, we sensed that this could be bigger. And so we were very clear that our number one priority was safety of our people, and we wanted to get our people working from home as quickly as we could. So even before the lockdown, we started to get people sort of, settled at home because we thought this could be bigger, and we didn't want to take the chance that if it was, that we were caught unaware. The importance of communication. I think this has very fundamentally opened up our mind to how much we need to communicate with each other. One of the things I did, and we as a company were also going through a CEO transition, is I set up a weekly call with our former CEO, once a week, every Wednesday for 2 hours, where the top 15 people got together and we talked about, open agenda, structured conversations every week, irrespective whether there was an intense enough agenda to be connecting on. And I realized that I was connecting more with those people in those 10, 15 weeks than I had perhaps done in the last 1 year or 2 years in that structured of form. Right? So the importance of communication, the importance of having stand-up meetings, the importance of just connecting face-to-face. The other thing I found, which is remarkable, is, we're a global company, and so many of our people are based overseas. And I realized I would see them face-to-face when I traveled. If I was connecting with them when I was in India, I would do a teleconference. I would do a call. And now the concept of a call is completely dead, right? Because you now connect only on video. So you're actually seeing people in many ways that much more. And so the intimacy is changing. You and I are coming into each other's homes. The intimacy of coming into each other's homes is a different kind of intimacy. So there's a lot of advantage and learnings which I think we should leverage. We talked about the importance of trust, which I think is hugely important. I think the other thing which we are grappling with, and we just talked about this a couple of weeks ago, actually, is what is the formal sort of SOP, if you want to use that word, of how things work going forward in this model, especially when some people will work from home, some people, what is decent dress code, for example, when you're working from home? What is the fact that, what are the, appropriate times? Let people have lunch. People are spending more time on emails. The sense of when your personal day starts or ends is becoming more and more blurred. How do you define that? Is it okay, if your child walks behind you, and is that awkward or is that not? Because people live in confined spaces, and that's perfectly okay. I was in a very, very important senior call with the CEO of a large company, maybe 6-8 weeks ago. And my son, who never disturbs me normally, walked into the camera. 6 months ago, I would have been very embarrassed, right? I was perfectly okay. We actually cracked a joke about it. So how do you leverage this new way of working into your full-time way of working? Because some people will be working from home and some people will be working from the office. So there's lots of learnings, which I think will become a permanent feature as we move forward.
Right. I mean, that's one of the questions that I'm seeing. People are putting in this question, saying that what is your take on work from home output and efficiency? And I think you're right. You're right. It doesn't seem that strange if you're suddenly getting into each other's homes is one thing. It's not that radical if you actually have a kid who walks in and out. And I think maybe IT and other things. So one of the questions is what is the importance of tech in uplifting the world from the corona pandemic? So if we just look ahead a little bit, it's very possible that many of the issues that even we're talking about right now, if you are working from home, how do you get to have a more informal setting? How do you talk more frequently? Maybe the answer to that would be better tech, maybe a slightly more three-dimensional virtual reality sort of ways of interacting. Maybe there's something like a video room that will be set up, which is like my office, where anybody can walk in at any time and have a conversation. I'm always sitting there with a camera always on. I don't know. Maybe there are other ways that tech will move to fix some of the problems that you have.
Look, I think we also have to appreciate the flip side of this. Right? The flip side of this is taxing. People are anxious. People want to get out of their homes. A lot of you and I may be quite blessed and privileged in terms of having the comfort of an office space or a space where somebody doesn't have to walk into. Right? A lot of people lived in confined spaces. A lot of people live in multi-generational families in confined spaces, and so it is much harder. It is much more distracting. It is not as productive. So that's the flip side, right? But in terms of the broader point on, look, I think it changes certain industries, and I think certain industries will leverage that. So, for example, if I can continue leveraging a contactless way of engaging with certain products that I buy, then why not? If I can still leverage a curbside pickup or a curbside drop-off for a retail experience, as an example, perhaps those kinds of things will continue. So what we've learned in this model in terms of how to get what we need or what we want done in this new medium, I think will not completely disappear.
Right. Sanjay Srivastav says, what is your vision for convergence of IT and telecom in this decade? The overall global view seems to be, and you can see it even internationally. I mean, look at the rise of the American tech sector, the rise of the American tech sector. So many big deals being done in Indian telecom as well during the pandemic. The positioning of IT and digital as this is very clearly the future, and this is the big way that you have to approach the world. Is that something which you do buy into, though? IT, telecom, digital, that's the way it's going to be.
Vikram, I think the relevance of a digital first way of engaging with your customers has dramatically changed. Right? I think the importance of the ways of working. We're working in a remote sort of distributed manner. We are leveraging collaboration tools that we never used before. How many of us even knew some of these tools existed till 7 months ago? We're all working on many different tools. That's very real, right? The adoption of cloud has moved and accelerated at a pace unlike ever seen before. Microsoft talked about this. That the pace they've seen in 2 or 3 months is what perhaps would have taken many years for it to happen. And the reality is that people are using it because they have more transactions, they have more flexibility, they want to be able to scale up and scale down very quickly. So that's very, very real, right? Digital is fundamentally changing certain industry models completely, and they are finding the value of this change model, which they will leverage. We've talked about examples in the restaurant industry, or the hospitality industry, or the retail industry, right? I think the power of contactless is going to be very powerful. The one flip to all of this is cybersecurity. And how do you ensure that how do you ensure environments are safe? The threat surfaces have dramatically gone up because we're working from home. We're working, just the ability to be more safe. The need to be more safe has gone up dramatically, and so that becomes an incredibly important thing. If you ask me, one of the things I obsess with and I worry about, is about how do we ensure that our environment is continuously safe, because that's one thing that again can rattle the model, that can really frighten people. Hey, perhaps having everybody distributed all across the world is perhaps not a good idea. They're much safer when they're sitting all together in select spaces. So that's the flip. But certainly I believe that this new way of engaging in this digital first world is very real and only going to accelerate.
Right, Rishad, I think we are out of time, so maybe I just end it there. But one last quick question to you personally. I mean, any personal lessons or experiences that you've had, how this has changed your own life and made you rethink of a change that you may have brought in your personal life?
No, I think the importance of connecting with people, the importance of reaching out to people and truly checking on how they are and truly meaning, when you care about how they are doing. Because a lot of people have dealt with this very differently. I know people who've struggled and really struggled on many different levels, despite the fact that you would think that, on paper, why do they need to struggle? I mean, they're very comfortable, so to speak. So I think really being there and understanding and making sure that you're there for people. I know one of the things we've spent a fair amount of time on as a company is ensuring, the mental wellness of our people, ensuring that they have access to people they can talk to, for example, those kinds of things, which I think are incredibly important. So for me, it's been very, humbling in that sense to really make sure that I'm connecting with people much more than I did before and truly checking on them and being one team.
All right, Rishad, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. I'm still seeing questions coming in, but I think we are out of time. So thank you so much for joining us. And let's hope that, let's see how soon the world gets back to normal and what the lasting impact of all of this is. Thanks a lot for having spoken to us.
Thank you for having me, Vikram.